Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 2 of Life Lessons and Combat Sports. I hope you enjoyed the first episode, and as of the time that I'm recording this, it's Monday. I hope you guys had a good weekend. So, here we are with another edition of this podcast, and something that's going to be a little bit different from the first episode is that bear with me, the person that I'm going to be talking about in this particular episode, it's not nearly as famous as a figure as Stone Cold Steve Austin was, but the kind of message that is gained from this particular incident or from this particular person, I think it's very worthwhile. And to be perfectly honest, I also think it's something that a lot of people can relate to. And once again, as a disclaimer, you may see me looking down a little bit at times. I'm just making sure that my recorder is fine and that the levels are all good. So with that being said, before I actually talk about the subject matter, something that I wanted to mention that I didn't get a chance to last time was that a big motivation for me to do this whole podcast is to also try to give people an idea of why it is I enjoy combat sports, or how I see it, or what do I get from it, or how do I view it. Now, I'm not trying to turn anyone into a fan, because it's not always going to appeal to people, or not everyone's going to like it. But I guess what I'm trying to do is showcase the value in it, or at least the value that I've gotten from watching all these different combat sports for so many years. And maybe that kind of gives one a better, excuse me, maybe that gives one, or if somebody that I know is watching this, then it gives them a better idea of how I view it and what I enjoy about it and all that stuff. And with that being said, let's just go into the episode. So, for this one, I'm going to talk about someone who's in the MMA industry. And just to sort of fit in with that whole combat sports thing, we're actually talking about combat sports now in mixed martial arts. But the person I'm talking to is not a fighter or anything like that. It's more of an analyst of the sport. He's not really a well-known or mainstream name, but it's somebody that I've been following for several years, and I think he has really good takes on the sport, and also I think that he's very, very good at his job. So this person's name is Luke Thomas. He's a host for Morning Combat, and he also does this live chat almost every week where basically he just posts a thread and people can post questions and he'll answer them on air, and it airs on YouTube and all that stuff. And there was one episode that he did back in June of last year where he was talking about the concept of how a lot of people want their kids to be certain things, or they want them to have certain careers, such as, oh, I want my kid to be a doctor, or I want my kid to be a lawyer, I want my kid to do this or that, or whatever it may be. And there's something that he says in there that I feel like is very, I think it's important to hear. And for me, what I'm kind of trying to do is that give this little bit of piece of advice. Not that I'm one to give advice, because I mean, after all, this is related to children, or just like this is related to raising children. And I don't have any kids of my own, so who am I to say? And I don't know what kind of a parent I don't know what kind of a parent I would be if I ever do have kids. But something that he mentions in this particular episode, I feel like is something that is really something that I feel like it's something that's really important. And he said something along the lines of, all these people, they want their kids to have these elite jobs and all this stuff, when for me, all I want he has a daughter. He was saying that all he wants for his daughter is to be happy. And I feel that's a very important thing, because I think most people, or a lot of people, in one way or another, for one reason or another, they have been in situations where their parents wanted them to do certain things, engage in certain activities, or, have certain careers. And I think honestly, it is important to have some type of stable, good means of making money. But at the same time, if we look at it, it's sort of along the lines of, if your child doesn't want to be a doctor or a lawyer, then I think it's important to discover what it is that they do enjoy, because ultimately them being happy is more important than, let's just throw examples out there. I've known people and I've known friends and stuff like that whose parents, they wanted them to be doctors for some reason, or someone chose a particular major to study, but the parents didn't enjoy that, or they didn't approve of it, or they didn't agree to it, or they decide to take a certain course and they're thinking, what's the point of that? And I guess it's like, when you kind of focus so much on the specific thing that you want them to do, as opposed to what's the thing that will make them happy, there's a little bit of a cost, a sacrifice, and a little bit of negative emotions that come from that, because ultimately, how do you plan on doing anything, and how do you plan on getting ahead and being able to be productive and living a healthy life if the thing you're doing is something that you don't enjoy? And I guess here's an easier way that I can put it, is that I knew somebody who used to do guitar lessons. He used to teach kids guitar lessons. And he told me that he would go to one of the houses of his students, and within the first few minutes he could tell that, okay, this person hasn't even touched a guitar since last week. And I was having the conversation with this individual about that whole matter, and I was saying something along the lines of, well, it doesn't seem like playing the guitar was something that he really wanted to do or was interested in. And I kind of posed the question, was it that the parents just wanted him to play the guitar for whatever reason? And he agreed that there wasn't really the motivation or the passion there to play the instrument. And I posed the question that maybe the parents should have worked with their kid to try to see what it is, like what kind of activity, what kind of hobby they do enjoy. And once again, far be it of me to give parenting advice or something like that, but I think all this is just for me to sort of, I don't know, put this at least in the mind, or like at the forefront of people's mind, or at least consider. Maybe you do have kids. Maybe you are going to have kids. Maybe you'll have them someday. Maybe you're about to. I don't know where you're at. But if you want them to do some type of hobby, or you want them to, I guess, do something productive and healthy or creative or whatever it is it may be, try to go through a discovery process, like letting them see what they like, try out different things and then see what it is that they enjoy doing. Because honestly, I feel that if you enjoy something that you do, it's going to be a lot easier for you to kind of pursue it and get better at it, and you want to practice it and you want to do it and all this other stuff. And maybe that is playing an instrument. Maybe you have a child and he or she wants to play the guitar and then they really enjoy it and then they pursue that, or they're playing tennis a lot and that's something that they really enjoy doing. In that kind of a situation, I would recommend not taking the approach of, oh, well, they like tennis, but I want them to play basketball, so I'm going to have them play basketball even though they hate it. And I'm sure there's a lot of different reasons why parents sort of motivate their kids to do certain things or to pursue certain endeavors. I can't, I'm sure we can come up with any number of reasons. However, I guess hypothetically, what I'm kind of saying, is this really hypothetical? Because I feel like this is something that could be done, is that you try to see what it is that they enjoy. Do they enjoy gymnastics? And I often say this a lot, do they enjoy making pottery? I don't know. There's 8 billion people on the planet. Someone must have that as a hobby. And a little bit of a side note, I talked to somebody who said that they know people who do, in fact, make pottery, and they're very calm and very happy people, very peaceful people, like going, easygoing, whatever the hell it is. So I don't know exactly how you would go about that or where you would go to do that, but I guess what would be good is to sort of like expose the child to a lot of different things and see what's something that they kind of gravitate towards. Because what I've kind of been learning and what I've kind of been thinking about a lot lately is the fact that when you have something that you enjoy, you're willing to put in the work for it and you're willing to practice at it, or you're just more motivated. And it's like to the point where if you do engage in that activity or you practice or whatever it is, you're going to actually, it's almost like you're going to want to do it. As opposed to, take any activity that you don't enjoy and imagine having to do that on a regular basis. And, to be perfectly honest, that conversation that I had with the person who would teach guitar, he, it kind of hit me I guess it would have been better to, document my thoughts about it at that time, but I didn't have the idea to do this podcast until now. So I'm doing the best I can to go off of memory. And I remember I just felt very strongly about that at the time, and it really hit me like a ton of bricks, because also I kind of think from my own experience how there were certain things that, my relatives wanted me to do or wanted me to pursue, or just, all that stuff. And, I think kind of not being active in sort of figuring out what it is that I like, or being allowed. And I guess, how can I put this? I had it really good, like yesterday. It was like, if there's more emphasis put on let's find something that you enjoy as opposed, and okay, so more emphasis on let's find out what you enjoy and less emphasis on I want you to do this because of X reason, whatever it is, then I feel like that could lead to a little bit of a healthier kind of development. And I don't know, maybe in a way I feel like it kind of opens the door for opportunities and just allows for happiness later on. And I suppose to kind of relate it to my own experience, I mean, as you've kind of seen so far, I really enjoy combat sports. But it almost feels like for the longest time, I've been trying to repress that, or I've been trying to not lean into it. And for me, I get not theoretically, I guess for me in hindsight, I'm sort of thinking, you know, and this isn't to say that, oh, my upbringing was so, I don't know, terrible or anything like that. I mean, because, one thing that I've definitely learned is that parents, they do the best that they can and they're not perfect people. So it's just hard to raise kids. So who's to say that I would do any better at it? But what I'm kind of thinking is that it's something I've always enjoyed, but I've never kind of leaned into it or tried to in more capacities than just like, oh, if you want to be in the boxing industry, you have to be a boxer or whatever. There's other ways you can be involved with industries or fields of work that you like, as opposed to just being a participant in it. It's kind of like, okay, if you wanted to work in the basketball industry, is the only way to do that is to be a basketball player? It never really, I guess it never really kind of clicked with me at that time. So what I'm getting at is that if I was kind of more in an environment where that was a little more emphasized or nourished, that it's like, hey, this is something that you like, so let's lean into and figure out what you can enjoy, I feel like that could lead to a happier life. And for me personally, I mean, if we want to relate it to other people's experience, like let's say that I don't know, let's say somebody is really into science, or like they're really into chemistry, or they're really into paleontology, whatever it may be. If that's something that your child really enjoys, then lean into that, as opposed to, and I'm just throwing out examples here, as opposed to like, oh, my kid really likes paleontology, but I want them to be an athlete, so they're going to play a sport of some kind. I guess there's a little part of me that kind of wonders, like how things could have been different if something like that had happened. But I mean, ultimately, how am I gonna, I don't know. You can't spend time on that. And I guess over the last few years, what I've been doing is that when I've kind of been embracing this love of combat sports that I have, I've found that it's made me a happier person, as opposed to, for instance, when I was younger and I would almost be like a closet wrestling fan, or I wouldn't want to lean into my MMA fandom so much. And ultimately in life, you want to be happy. I mean, that isn't to say, I mean, of course, making money is important too. But your happiness is also important. And I think if you don't have that, life just becomes a lot harder than than if you're just like, if you're like a little bit low on money, but you enjoy what you do. Because it's a lot harder to do the work when you don't enjoy something. And I bring all this up because I wanted to bring some type of aspect from an actual sport into this life lessons component. And I haven't done too much talking about, I guess, Luke Thomas or his incident or whatever it is, but that's just because, I mean, at its core, I think it's a really simple principle. And there's a lot to take away from that, or just, I don't know. I feel like there's a lot of things to explain about that as far as wanting your kid to be happy or just having that as a goal and then working towards that. And I'm just trying to articulate the different examples of how that can be accomplished. Like I said, for me personally, maybe if I kind of leaned into this aspect or maybe this field of work earlier, then there's certain struggles or strains or what have you that I wouldn't have experienced. But of course, it's impossible to know. But if you are a parent, I think that's something worth keeping in mind. Because, I mean, if you have a kid who likes making pottery and if they enjoy making pottery and that makes them happy whenever they do that, I mean, how can you not say that's going to make them a happier person on a daily basis? Just their outlook on everything is going to be a lot better, or just they're going to feel more empowered every day. And especially as they get older, then they'll be more at peace with how things kind of like turned out, I suppose. So that was the thing that he mentioned in that podcast, was how he wants his kids to be happy. And just, I guess another aspect of this is also, how can I describe this? I think another aspect about this is if, I don't know. This is all kind of like very important to me. And, I guess the other way that I can describe all this is that I've seen it with friends and all that stuff that I know of who their parents were so fixated on, hey, I want you to do this and you need to be a doctor, or just you have to go to college and pursue this and just, have this type of a career or whatever it is. And it's like, I don't know. At the time that I had the conversation with the former guitar instructor, I felt very strongly about that, because it's like I had seen that so much and so much emphasis was put on that, and it almost created the reaction where I was thinking, you put so much emphasis in, you wanted your kid to play the violin, or you wanted them to play baseball or whatever it is, and you were just so focused on that despite there being some other kind of activity that they enjoy, and finding out what that is, that it's like, how did that turn out? Because in some of those cases, it did create confusion or resentment or disillusionment or regret or whatever it may be. And I don't know, I would like to think that had more of a emphasis been made to try to figure out what it is that they like to do, then they wouldn't have those feelings as adults. I don't know. Impossible to say, but I think it's at least worth considering. And to kind of go back on that conversation that I had with the former guitar instructor, I mentioned something along the lines of, oh, maybe the parents should have been a little more proactive and like tried to actually figure out what it is that their son liked to do. And he replied to me saying that, well, he liked to play video games. And it's just like, well, besides that, because how I was viewing it is like, okay, I know you like to play video games, but let's find another activity that you enjoy, or another hobby, or something that's productive, or that's like a creative outlet, or whatever it may be. I mean, you know, I don't think I would be the type of parent where I'm like, I never want my kids to play video games and all that shit. But, everything in moderation. So that kind of work I feel like is really important, and I guess that kind of effort really means a lot, and it can mean a lot. And that would just be, I guess, my suggestion for, like I said, anyone who is a parent or will be a parent or whatever it may be. Because now I'm at an age where some of my friends already do have kids, or they're going to have kids. And I think the biggest takeaway, or one of the biggest takeaways that I want people to get from this, is just to make sure that your child is happy. And I think this can apply to anybody, regardless of what age their children are, whether they're still kids, or they're teenagers, or they're already adults. I don't think it's ever really too late to stress and emphasize to your child, do what makes you happy. Now, I mean, some of this stuff I'm saying right now is just kind of like my opinion, but also some of it I feel like people can kind of gravitate to that, or, get on board with that. So I guess that's part of the reason why I'm doing this podcast now, is because of the things that sorry, just outside the music's kind of distracting. It's like an ice cream truck going by or something. Anyway, some of it is my opinion, but also some of it I feel like is a good little words of wisdom that anybody watching this can take. And just, I feel like that's very important. Sorry, it's just the stupid truck. All right. So that's what I feel like is another thing that I've gotten from watching combat sports, or just at least in this particular incident. And I don't know, it's kind of been hitting me quite a lot. And, this whole idea of wanting to be happy, I mean, this is a subject matter that I'll probably revisit down the line, just with different individuals or different examples and such like that. So when that time comes, we'll come to it. So I guess the only thing that I would want to leave with y'all with is that there's a lot of different subject matters or individuals that I can cover, that I can talk about on this podcast. Not all of them are always going to be positive. In fact, if things go as planned, the next subject matter I talk about might be pretty tragic, as far as the incident in said combat sport. But my point for all this is to give some type of positive lesson or a takeaway, or try to see what you learned from it. Sometimes it'll be a good result that leads to a good lesson. Sometimes it's a bad result that leads to a good lesson. And sometimes it'll be like a bad result that leads to, word of caution. But I think the important thing, or just the reason why I feel it's very important to talk about the various scenarios, is because even from the most negative or just tragic circumstance, there is some type of lesson to be taken from it. And I'm not saying this because of this particular episode, but just as a little bit of kind of giving you a heads up about the episodes and just like what may come up as I do this. But yeah, I think as far as this whole subject matter goes, you know, just make sure that your kids are happy, because ultimately I think that will lead to a lot of other good results and a lot of other good outcomes. So I'll just leave you guys with that. And yeah, hopefully you got something of value from this, and hopefully you guys have a good rest of your day and good rest of your night. And we'll be back again with an episode later. Thanks for listening to this. Thank you for your time. And if you have any comments, you can leave them below in the comment section. And I'll see you guys on the next one.